Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And I'm Simon Mann.
We've just witnessed a titanic rearguard action by Worcester at Taunton, but that match ended in a draw. It's been an interesting 4 days of cricket, blessed by glorious weather. What's been your focus, Simon, overall?
Well, I think huge scores in the first round of matches, early April, huge scores, but also in that match at Taunton, you had 110 overs of spin in the final innings of the match. And you're talking about early April. I say spin. I mean, there wasn't a lot there for Archie Vaughan and Jack Leach, but they wheeled away and produced so many overs. I mean, just how many overs was Somerset in the field and how many overs were Essex in the field? I mean, the first game of the season and you're in the field for what was it? 227 overs for Essex because they made Surrey follow on. I mean, what are you going to be feeling like after that?
Yeah, well, you're going to be tired, obviously. And actually, it kind of, in a way, relates back to the piece I wrote in the Sunday Times yesterday about the formula in future, one of the proposed formulas for the first class game, aired by Tim Bostock. You heard that on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, if you were listening to it, actually. And one of his plans was to start the championship season a little bit later and reduce the number of games by one. So each team played only 12 games rather than 14, 13 or 14. If they got to a playoff, they'd play 13, but otherwise it would be 12 games per team. And it would just mean the season eased in a little bit more, whereas you've already got, on the 7th of April, some exhausted bowlers. Jack Leach has bowled 65 overs in this second innings at Taunton. Archie Vaughan's bowled about 50 overs, and lots of other bowlers around the country as well. And it's only the 7th of April. I mean, it's tough, isn't it? If you start this early and you have this sort of weather and obviously determined batters, flat pitches, it's hard yakka.
Yeah, it really is. Someone should write a book with that title, shouldn't they? A lot of hard yakka, something like that. Anyway, might work. Who knows?
You never
But I
know.
think it's kind of like the hangover from a very dry March, isn't it? So that there isn't much moisture around, so it has been really tough, generally speaking, for the bowlers. You mentioned those three draws out of five in the first division, scores of 670 from Somerset, 582 from Essex, 528 from Sussex. 579 from Nottinghamshire. I mean, the only place where the bowlers had a bit of relief in the first division really was at that match between Hampshire and Yorkshire, which
Yeah.
Hampshire won, quite convincingly. Well, 5 wickets, a low scoring game. So that they're off to a really good start to the season. But I mean, we've been blessed with incredible weather. The problem is, I'm just watching the end of that Somerset game, watching the Essex game as well. I watched a lot of both games today. The pitches are quite slow, aren't they? Really, there's not much, not much pace and bounce in the pitch. There's a little bit of slow turn, but really difficult for everyone. And if batters are determined to stick it out, then they are going to escape. And well done to Matthew Waite and Tom Hindley for Worcestershire. I mean, to go into the final day actually 280 for five and survive. Does take a lot of effort, doesn't it? And a lot of determination, a lot of guts and belief. There was also that horrendous, well, I say horrendous, a pretty tight LBW decision, I thought, against Brett D'Oliveira of Worcestershire. I don't know whether you've seen it, of Archie Vaughan bowling went outside the off stump and he padded up and it looked a really tough one to give. But I suppose if you don't use your bat, the umpires might fire you out. But I didn't think that was out. I don't expect many players will be given out from that sort of LBW decision, but there we go. It was given out, and then ultimately Worcestershire survived, so they probably won't have any complaints about that.
Well, it was a tremendous last wicket stand, actually, wasn't it? 87 balls Tom Hindley and Matthew Waite held out. Tom Hindley in just his second championship match, mainly a wrist spinner, batting at number 11, and he survived 44 balls for his 5 not out. Matthew Waite survived 319 for 87 not out. And actually, it's easy to sort of think, well, it's the first game of the season, what bearing will it have on the championship? But actually it could. I hark back actually 40 years, alarmingly, to a rearguard action I was part of at Bournemouth against Hampshire, and it was the middle of the season, and we were 80 for late at tea chasing 250. So we obviously had no hope of actually winning the match. And we survived that ninth wicket pair, me and Jamie Sykes, who was a spin bowling all-rounder. We survived the last hour and a half, 2 hours play post tea. And you thought, well, okay, it's a middle of the season game. Hampshire Middlesex is not going to have that much bearing on the championship. But in fact, it did, because Hampshire finished 2 points behind Middlesex in second place. So we won the championship partly, slightly on the back of that draw, which we held out for. So you never know what kind of impact this rearguard action by Worcester will show or will have later in the season. We'll reflect on some of these championship matches. We'll also talk about our five to follow that we mentioned in the last podcast and how well they've done over those 4 days. But first, I suppose we should just talk about Harry Brook, who was today announced as England's white ball captain for both 50 over and T20. I guess it was a fairly open secret that he was probably going to be nominated. There were a few other names dotted around and aired around the place. None of them probably that likely. I mean, Sam Billings was one, James Vince another. I asked Lewis Gregory at Somerset if perhaps his name was in the hat, but he said no. Harry Brook was the kind of man incarnate, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, what were my thoughts on it? Not the perfect option. Perhaps the perfect option never exists, but the most logical, perhaps the most plausible, really. I mean, it is quite a big workload for Harry Brook. Your white ball captain, so T20 and one day international cricket. There was some talk of splitting it. Rob Key punted the name out there. Ben Stokes. It's interesting, actually, the reaction to that. I mean, there's been some quite strong reactions. Stuart Broad, I think, was against it. Michael Vaughan came out against it really strongly, didn't he, the other day? So I don't know. You could see some logic in Ben Stokes, but my instinctive reaction when I heard Ben Stokes' name put forward was no, that's not the thing to do. It's asking too much of him. But England don't play a lot of one-day international cricket, but you're thinking, you're planning for the next World Cup, aren't you? Really, you want players that are going to be, fit and motivated and committed. I'm not saying Ben Stokes wouldn't be committed. He would, but there's been a lot. There's a lot on his body, isn't there, to stay fit for Test cricket, where England need him to bowl and bat and captain and be their sort of talisman, and then to expect him to guys retired from one day international cricket. Is it twice? I mean, he's certainly done it once, and he's come back, and then he's not played since. So to ask him to captain the side and he would have said yes, as Michael Vaughan said. Yeah, he would have said yes, because that's
But yeah,
kind of what
that's
he's
the problem.
like.
He wouldn't
Yeah, I
have been
think
able to turn it down, would he?
no, but it probably at this stage it's not. It doesn't feel like the right option. So Harry Brook is, to my mind, he gets in the one day team, he gets in the T20 team, he captained England quite. I think interestingly, didn't he, in that one day series against Australia, he played really well. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the obvious choice, really. I mean, I'm not sure it necessarily will bring England success, because they've got some tough assignments ahead. T20 World Cup in India. I mean, that is a really tough assignment, and I wonder whether he's got the ammunition. I wonder whether he's got the tools. I don't so much think about the batting. I think that will sort itself out. I think I'm more thinking having really got the bowlers to succeed. I'm not sure that they have. So it could be a tough period. I mean, if he makes a success of it, well, he'll have done extremely well, I think, with the resources that are potentially available to him.
Yeah, I mean, what they need is spinners, don't they, England, really? There's enough pace bowlers with one day, short form white ball experience to probably find a reasonable attack. They need to find a left arm fast bowler, probably, someone to augment the right armers like Jofra Archer. And others, and one or two others sort of on the fringes, but they definitely need someone to help Adil Rashid, because he can't go on forever. And if Harry Brook doesn't have an alternative to Adil Rashid, someone who can just take the burden of his spin bowling middle overs, then it is going to be a tough job for him. Yeah, I think it was a fairly inevitable, and he's had a reasonable track record as captain. He's not being pitched into someone who hasn't ever done it. He's captain in the 100, and he's shown a reasonable level, not only of reasonable level of imagination, but actually just the calmness as well. And that it's a very kind of ferocious thing to captain one day cricket where balls are flying everywhere and suddenly someone hits 24 off an over and you could easily just freak out, but you've just got to stay calm and stick to the plans and be reasonably flexible, but in the end, reassure your players that you know what's going on, even if you probably don't. And I think he's probably now he's had enough experience with another, year or so, he'll be fine. I mean, he's going to probably miss the tournament before the Ashes is the one I think that they might spare him because he's got some one-day matches to cover this summer, to captain this summer. But pre the Ashes, there's a tour to New Zealand, one-day series in New Zealand. The talk is he might get spared that, perhaps, before the onslaught of the Ashes.
It's weird, isn't it, to talk about, an England captain spared playing for
Yeah.
England, but it's kind of like the nature of the game these days, isn't it? I mean, the other side of it, yours, is that you might say, well, it might be just quite a good lead into the Ashes,
Mm.
and chance, I don't know, chance to find some form. That depends how well he goes this summer, doesn't it? Really, how much he plays, uh, how well he goes, how many runs he scores. I mean, one thing about him, I think, as captain in the T20 World Cup next year in India is that he has really struggled, I think, against spin in Indian conditions. So, that's going to be a problem for him. The focus is going to be on him when that tournament gets underway, and his ability to play against the spinning ball in Indian conditions. Okay, he's playing, a lot of the time he's playing against Indian bowlers in a T20 World Cup. You won't always be playing against India, but you might come up against them. But other sides as well in those conditions, you might be able to exploit, potential weaknesses. That's why I think, he's. I think there was a debate, wasn't there, about him pulling out of the IPL. That actually is quite, it would be a good learning experience to go and play in the IPL. But also there is that managing the situation, and if you are white ball captain and you're absolutely key in the Test team as well, which he is, and there's such a huge year coming up with all the testing. It's India and then the Ashes. Something you feel something's got to give, and he's made that decision. There's a financial aspect to it as well, isn't it? Not playing the IPL, he's been banned for the next 2 years. But then, if you're a double England captain, you'll get probably more than going to make up for that, aren't you? In fees, etc. Playing for
Mm.
England. So
Yeah.
there's a huge it's a massive thing, isn't it? To be named England captain it's we talked about it today. It's something I dreamed of, and not many people get that opportunity. And yeah, he's got that opportunity now, and who knows? It may even lead one day to being Test captain as well.
I wonder if it puts to bed the idea that he opens in white ball cricket because you're right, he has struggled against spin, and I don't think England have quite found the right opening partner for Ben Duckett in white ball. Phil Salt has done it, and he's done it okay in T20. I'm not sure he's quite right for 50 over cricket, so they need to find someone there who can take the assault to the bowlers, a right hander that in the manner of sort of Alex Hales, Jason Roy, Johnny Bairstow did in the past. Harry Brook could be that person, but I suppose if you're captain as well, that does put a lot of pressure on you, really, doesn't it? Do you know I was with someone today at Lords, an Indian man who hates the IPL. He'd rather watch Middlesex at Lords than he would an IPL game. He's never been. He lives in Mumbai. He's absolutely steeped in cricket. He's relatively young. He's in his late 40s, so he's not an old codger. Is what I mean. And he doesn't like the IPL at all, which is breaking new records for viewership. He was saying to me today that there's something like 350 million viewers. I also heard today that there's a possibility, you may have heard this yourself from your IPL commentaries, that there are going to be 20 IPL teams from 2030. So another 10 teams are going to be added in stages after 2030. Anyway, we digress. So it is going to take over the world, of course. But in the
Well, just one
meantime,
thing I'd
England.
say about that, Yoss. One thing I just would say about that is that this season, it feels as if the standard has been a bit lower, and the games have actually not been as interesting. I mean, you could argue that's because teams have actually been more ruthless this year. I think sometimes in the past, teams have kind of let games drift, and they kind of, I don't know whether it's psychological. They allow the games to get quite close, and and it builds up the drama. But this season, teams are just if you're not good enough, you just get knocked off, don't you? And teams have been winning within 17, 16 overs, whatever, and there have been some absolute hammering so far, and actually very few close matches. So I don't think it's actually been as a spectacle. It's been probably that compelling this season. But you don't surprise me when you say that they're looking at 20 teams by 2030, because you don't see the IPL shrinking. You see it potentially expanding. The only thing is do you have the talent pool? With overseas players as well, to keep something going that is compelling for everyone. If you've got it more thinly spread in terms of the talent, but then we've seen lots of players come through in India from all sorts of different parts of the country who have surprised everybody, and that probably
Yeah.
will continue as they trawl more and more around the country for
Yeah.
talented young players.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I mean, I don't know whether the owners will be appreciating the idea of more teams as well, because the original 10 owners, or the current 10 owners of the various IPL teams, bought into it with the idea that it was a closed league or there was no relegation. And of course, we know what happens in, say, Premier League. When you get relegated, you lose a huge amount of money, and probably your owners want to go and, sort of string themselves up somewhere. So,
So you're talking about two divisions, are you? You're talking about two
well,
divisions?
yeah, yeah. That's the kind of idea on the back burner is to. I mean, you look, they've got 23 stadiums now, I think, in India. Obviously, the well-known cities, but more and more developing. Somewhere like Assam, Guwahati, which is right in the sort of north east corner of India, close to the Chinese border almost. That there, they could create a team there, for instance. Anyway, and it's all a bit conjecture, but it will be interesting to see how the owners react to the idea, because the fact they've got a closed league gives their money, the investment, a bit more guarantee. But anyway, let's go from the ridiculous to the sublime. Just talk about county cricket a bit. That top of the table clash, Essex-Surrey, has ended in a draw. Do you think Essex will feel they batted on too long?
Well, they gave themselves enough
A
time,
lot of
surely,
chance,
to.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, if the pitch is flat and slow, I mean, they were in the field for 227 overs. So, I mean, yeah, they had a reasonable amount of time in the second innings to bowl Surrey out, but Surrey got a good batting lineup, a really strong batting lineup, actually. And Sibley today was in his rock-like sort of, mood, batting a heck of a long time. He did manage to run out Jamie Smith in a horrible mix-up. But look, it's not easy. Actually, I thought quite good from Surrey, wasn't it? Really, they showed that determination that you need to be champions. They were well behind in the game. It was quite tough to take that. 582 for six. 300s in the Essex lineup, including Paul Walter making 95, and Surrey under pressure, but they managed to battle away. They just said, right, I don't think we can win the game. Well, sure as heck not going to lose it, which is what they managed to do, and they did it with a reasonable degree of comfort. I didn't think they were, just watching the final there, I didn't think that I never thought from a moment really that Essex were going to win the match. So it's a bit of a statement from it's a good, well, fair play to Essex, but it's also a bit of a statement of Surrey as well, isn't it? That you're going to have to play really, really well to beat us and
Mm.
to take our title away from us.
Yeah, and actually, the scores that we've seen around the country sort of belie the idea that early season pitches help the seamers, because in most cases they haven't actually. I mean, I was at Lord's today, and that was flat, that pitch. And in fact, it was an impressive fight back by Middlesex, really, after conceding quite a big lead to Lancashire to total 407 all out. And Max Holden played superbly, 180, batting at number 3. Andrew Strauss many years ago, he said, "Look, watch out for this lad, Max Holden. Good young player, captained England under 19s." Strauss has really kind of stuck his colours to the mast there. And it's funny, he looks exactly like Andrew Strauss. He bats in a similar way. When he walked off 184, eventually dismissed, he walks like Straussy as well, and even brandishes his bat in the air like him as well. Let's hope that. I mean, he's been a bit of a slow developer. Hasn't quite delivered on the promise that he suggested a couple of years ago. Maybe this could be his year. And Strauss was someone who only came through when he was 27, 28, and Holden isn't quite as old as that. But, I just wonder if this could be a big year for him. Anyway, Middlesex did well in the end to make a good game of that. Lancashire had to chase quite a lot of runs, and that was another quite exciting draw, actually, with lots of good cricket, but very bat dominated.
Holden's 27 and Strauss made his debut at 27. But he was kind of talked about, wasn't he, Strauss, as that, yeah, he is a potential England player. But I mean, making his debut at 27 and then playing 100 Test matches, that was
Yeah.
extraordinary, really. That what he was able to achieve. What about our 5 cricketers that we said we were going to follow in the first round of matches? You can go through what your 5 turned up with, and we'll revisit this during the season from time to time. Perhaps not in every podcast, but from time to time. What about your 5, and how did they get on?
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you about that just after this quick break, actually. I just want to remind you about the Substack blog, the Crickverse, which has another couple of articles on it. A brilliant article last week, actually, by Derek Pringle about Phil Tufnell. I tried a bit of an April Fool's on people to say Tufnell was thinking of a comeback because Middlesex need a left-arm spinner. Of course, they have actually got one now, Zafar Gohar, who bowled well in that match at Lord's, a Pakistani-born left-arm spinner. So they don't need Tuffers. But it's a lovely piece about Tuffers' skill and madness in the England side, written by Derek Pringle on that Crickverse site. And you can go to it if you Google the Crickverse. If you subscribe to it, you'll enter the competition for free tickets for the Lord's Test, England-India. So it's well worth looking out for that. Join us on the Crickverse. And after the break, we'll review how our 5 to follow got on.
Okay, let's get to our 5 to follow then. So just remind everyone who your 5 to follow were and how did they get on, and who was the big winner in the opening round of championship matches?
Well, I would say probably Josh Tongue, actually, who, of course, now plays for Notts. And he took 7 wickets in the match, bowled Durham out in the second innings, 5 for 66, and he got 55 runs as well, batting down the order. Got 2 for in the first innings, quite expensive, going at 5 and over. And I think he took a little while to get his radar sorted. But second innings, 5 for 66, bowling Durham out and giving Nottinghamshire the chance for an 8-wicket win, plus his runs. So I've given him 8 out of 10 for that performance. What about you?
Yeah, I'd give him a few more. I might give him a bit more than 8 out of 10 for that. I mean, that's a match-winning performance, isn't it? It's a brilliant start to the season from a player that has struggled for fitness, but he's obviously got some quality, and he turned the game around, didn't he? He just suddenly burst through and took wickets in that second innings and propelled Nottinghamshire to victory by helping to bowl Durham out. So who else have you got, Yoz?
Okay, well, my others were Alex Davis, the captain and opening bat for Warwickshire, who made 66 in a first wicket stand of 116 in the first innings against Sussex, failed in the second. So, decent start, certainly opening the batting in the first innings, but other batters got bigger scores than he did in that Warwickshire innings. I chose Archie Vaughan. We talked about him before, actually, showing the talent last year, but perhaps not showing the conviction at times. And actually, I thought in his bowling today, he just lacked a little bit of something, but he's still learning his game. He's not really considered a frontline bowler. He's more of a batter, an opening batter. He didn't score too many runs in the game. He just got 12 in that vast Somerset innings. What an incredible partnership that was. I mean, I have to give some credit to Lewis Gregory, actually, who was our last guest on the podcast, who said, watch out for Tom Banton this year. He's got a big, recommendation for him. And he hit 56 boundaries in that 371 to break the Somerset individual record. And coming in at number 5 as well. To score 371 is quite something. And of course, Lewis Gregory also mentioned James Rue's talent, and they put on 370 for was it the 5th wicket for Somerset? I mean, extraordinary performance. Anyway, so Archie Vaughan only made 12. I mean, he bowled pretty well, but he just couldn't quite get those key wickets at the end. Bowled 50 overs in the second innings, 1 for 113. Tough going. He'll certainly have learned a huge amount from it. Yeah, so decent with the ball, failed with the bat. Rayan Ahmed, I chose again. I was hoping to see more runs from him as well as wickets. Well, he barely bowled in Leicester's match. Uh, he got 1 for 14 in one innings. He failed with the bat in the first innings and actually ended up with opening the batting in the second innings as Leicester chased a small target, finished up 13 not out. So a bit of a sort of nothing match for him. The other guy I think did really well of my five, Jack Carson of Sussex, who took 4 for 92 in the Warwickshire innings and also made some runs, 27. So, showing some real talent, bowled a couple of absolute jaffers through the gate to clean up right-handers and off-spinners. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose of those five, I'd pick Jack Carson and Josh Tongue as the successes. What about you?
Yeah, well, James Rue was one of mine. You already mentioned him. How is he going to go this season? I suppose he was slightly overshadowed, well, very much overshadowed by that brilliant innings from Tom Banton, but he made 150, against Worcestershire on a pitch, obviously, that eased out as time went on. I mean, look at the scores at the start of the game. Worcester bowled out for 150 and Somerset 3 down for, 39 early on. You couldn't see the match possibly ending in a draw, on the fourth day with men around the bat, but that's the way it turned out. So James Rue, yeah, excellent start to the season for him. You can't do that much more, can you, than score 150 in your opening game of the season. My other pick was Sonny Baker of Hampshire, who played in a winning side in their opening game against Yorkshire, and he got Johnny Bairstow out twice. I don't know if you saw the first wicket, he actually bowled him in the second innings. The first wicket, Bairstow seemed to be bothered by an insect that was sort of buzzing around him, and he sort of walked away and then walked back, and then he got a ball from Baker that was a bit short, and he went for a kind of like an uppercut and got caught a deep third. So I mean, that's not a bad couple of feathers in your early season cap, is it, to get rid of Johnny Bairstow twice? Bairstow scoring a half century in the second innings. So that's Sonny Baker. Sam Cook, well, clearly a tough pitch to bowl on at Chelmsford. I did drop in on Sam Cook when he was bowling on, let me see, I think it was the third day, and he just started a spell. He was bowling mid-70s according to the speed gun. And remember, pace is a thing that the England selectors want, and I think there's a feeling he can bowl sort of 82, something like that. But I mean, may just have been bowling within himself in the conditions. Picked up a couple of wickets in the first innings, and then didn't bowl very much in the second innings. Just perhaps conserving his energy from the captain, with the focus on spin and Harmer bowling a lot of overs. So a couple of wickets in the match for Sam Cook. Not a devastating start to the season by any means, but a tough gig, I think, for all the pace bowlers at Chelmsford. My other two were Ben McKinney, who is a much vaunted opener at Durham, scoring 5 and 37. Josh Tongue, your man, dismissed him in the second innings. And Fergus O'Neill got him in the first innings. Now, Fergus O'Neill's quite an interesting character. He's one to just keep a bit of an eye on. Australian pace bowler. He's their overseas player, one of their overseas players at Trent Bridge this season. But I think there's a feeling that he might have a reasonable future ahead of young Australian bowler. Anyway, so O'Neill and Tongue limiting McKinney to under 50 runs in the match in his opening championship game of the season. And the other one was, how is Shoaib Bashir going to get on? Well, we don't expect too much, I think, from spinners in the opening round of matches. Although Jack Leach and Lawrence both got wickets before lunch on the opening day. Jack Leach took a wicket before lunch on the opening day of the season, and so too did Lawrence for Surrey. Bashir, 22 overs, 2 maidens, 0 for 92. Kind of very much show Bashir figures actually in recent times. But let's park that. Let's see how that progresses as time goes on. And the reason, I mean, those of you who listened to our last podcast, the reason I was interested in Bashir is not so much because I thought he would have to go really well this season, but I just want to see how he does go, because I think there's a bit of focus on him with how his winter went, perhaps his Lions winter went as well, that teams are just starting to get on top of him and causing him some problems. So how is he going to be able to cope with that and come back and take wickets? I mean, clearly England like him at the moment, but we'll see how that progresses as the summer goes on. So yeah, I mean, it's been a fascinating round of matches, hasn't it? I mean, the weather is absolutely
Mm.
incredible. I mean, we barely knew anything like it. Well, there was one year like it actually, but there was no cricket play because it happened during lockdown when the weather was like this. But fabulous to have like uninterrupted
Yeah,
first round
yeah,
of matches.
and yeah, and good crowds. And I heard someone say that the Somerset game was being watched on the top of Snowdon by somebody on the stream, which has got to be one of the more bizarre places to be able to watch cricket and actually still get a signal as well. So that's fantastic. And the streams, it's interesting. But last year, that match at Surrey, the Somerset Surrey game, when Jack Leach took a wicket in the last over to get Dan Worrell out to win the game. That was watched actually by 1 million people on YouTube. So it does show that there is some viewers out there who will consume this stuff if it's interesting, if it's compelling. And I think that just leads me on to a quick one about Tim Bostock's theories and ideas for the championship going forward. And one of the things that I think people liked about his suggestions, I put it in the Times, it's also now on the Crickverse as well, his sort of structure of the season next year. And it includes the idea that you have 3 conferences, 2 sort of senior conferences or premier conferences and 1 sort of lower conference, which is 6 teams trying to get into the top conferences. But you have playoffs and a relegation and promotion and a grand final at the end of the season. And I like that idea. And Ranji Trophy has it. The Sheffield Shield in Australia has it. And I feel that, of all the kind of ideas that have been put forward, that seems to be one that most people seem to like, from a few cynics who tend to respond to some of these articles with fairly negative views, most positive views about the idea of a grand final. What's yours?
Well, I had a look below the line, after I saw your article in the Times, just to see what the reaction was. And actually, you're right. Inevitably, there are going to be people that say, Simon Hughes should be sacked. He should never be allowed to comment on cricket again. Which I've sometimes had that view
That was
myself.
you. That's
But
you, isn't it? That's your byline, surely.
Well, writing as someone else, no, I wouldn't do that
Yeah.
to you, Oz. But but actually, there were quite a lot of positive responses, weren't there? Saying, that's an interesting idea. So actually, I think one of the best comments I read was someone said, "I need to go away and think about this and see what the
Yeah, that's
consequences are."
Helen Eccles. That's Helen Eccles, actually, who responds to a lot of the Times articles on cricket. She's a big fan of Mike Atherton, understandably, and his writing. And Athers and her sort of have a bit of a love-in almost, actually. Athers says, "Oh, thank you for the wonderful views that you've put in, Helen." And Helen writes back, "Yeah, all your articles are great." But she does actually put some interesting thought into it as well. You're quite right.
Yeah, so I think that's good, isn't it? To go away and think about it rather than just read the article, just respond straight away. Actually, it is something to go away and think about. I mean, I'm not totally against it. I think there is too much cricket played. I think you can cut the season down, and I agree that it does seem, we've talked about this before. Look, the Somerset objection might be, look, they sell out for their blast games, and one of the suggestions was to reduce the season. You need to take some of the blast games out as well. Take 2 rounds of championship, or at least 1 round of championship out. Just need to reduce the season by a couple of weeks. There are people saying, well, cricket never gets better by playing less, but actually, that's not strictly speaking true, because I think if you look after the players more, then they can put more in throughout the season. If you're just flogging them the whole time, I remember when you
Mm,
played,
mm.
you're just playing day after day after day, and okay, some people might turn up to watch from time to time, but you're managing injuries, you're managing your body the whole time. Are you at full tilt
You can't remember where
the
you
whole
are half
time?
the time as well, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, just to pick up on that, I had one year where, we play virtually every day in county cricket, and then I went abroad and played in the Curry Cup in South Africa, and that's where you only played, I think it was 10 games. So there were 6 teams. You played each team home and away, and that was a real difference, because every match there was a build-up. You'd have 2 or 3 days to think about it. And then you'd perhaps have some practice sessions at your home ground before getting on a flight to the away venue. You'd arrive at the away venue a day early and get there in time for sort of maybe an afternoon net and a meeting to consider the game. and then you play the match. And there was a sort of reception party almost in hotels for the visiting team, and it became, each game was an event, and you really built up to it properly and thought about it, and it was really intense cricket. And at the end, you were exhausted and you needed a week off.
Mm.
And ideally, that's what we want in county cricket. But it's difficult because of the shortness of the season and, squeezing all these games in, a number of teams and so on, all the tournaments. It is tough
Yeah, well,
to do.
it's the number of teams, isn't it? The number of teams, really.
Yeah.
But the season is not short anymore. The season is very long. I mean, it's lasts for 6 months. I mean, that's a heck of a long
Yeah, but
season,
it's
isn't it?
shorter than a football season, say, is what I meant, really.
Yeah,
But it needs to be, obviously.
yeah. I don't think you can't quite compare the two games, though, can you? Because one's short and sharp and intense. You can't play every day. Cricket, you can kind of play every day because there's some days where you just literally do nothing.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah, but
yeah,
even when you're there, I mean, that's true. But I mean, even on a
yeah,
day when your team bats all day and you're number 10,
yeah. Of course,
you
yeah,
know, there it's a commitment. It's kind of engaged in the
yeah,
game, unless you're Bill Tufnell, who's having a sleep on the couch for most of the time, unless he's next into bat. Most people are kind of quite consumed and absorbed. And even on a day when you don't do much, you feel like you've been there and done something, and your brain is being quite kind of tired, even if your body isn't.
yeah. So yeah, so look, those proposals are definitely worth thinking about. They're being debated. We'll look to see what comes of them. I mean, one of the things, of course, and the point you've made and Tim Boscott made is the money from the 100 sell-off will hopefully can compensate for the counties who lose a little bit, who would lose a bit if they lost a couple of blast matches. But his point also is a reasonable one, isn't it? That if the blast is more intense, it's more watchable in the same way that the Big Bash was more watchable this winter or summer in Australia. But they've reduced the number of games now, and actually it's kind of like got its mojo back again. So yeah, I think there is an argument to say that if there's a bit of a reduction, there's a bit more focus, and each match matters perhaps a bit more. But anyway, they're going to debate it, sort it out, and come up with a structure for future seasons. I think there's a feeling, and you articulated this in your article, that the season it doesn't quite work in its current structure. And there'll be people who are saying, well, that's because we've stuck the 100 right in the middle of August, but the 100 is also, it would seem, as long as the money turns up, is going to provide a huge source of revenue for the game to develop it, potentially transform it, as long as the money is used wisely.
Okay, well, that's it for this podcast. Thank you for listening. And I'm going to go to the next round of matches starting next Friday. The forecast looks good for the rest of the week. Friday, it's Surrey entertaining Hampshire at the Oval. So I'm going to pop down there. Maybe as it's your local ground, I'll see you there as well. What do you think?
Do yours? Yeah. Nice to see you. Speak to you soon. Goodbye for now.